Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Please feel free to continue to get some food. We're going to start a little bit earlier than 7 because I recognize a lot of people did come for a 6:30 start, but it gave you time to chat. Shh. I'm Jonathan Lev. I'm the executive director here at the Boulder JCC, and I think relationships are one of the key aspects of what make community really special. So we actually always build in time before or after a program to make sure that people can connect with one another, and I'm seeing that here. So despite some people's hope that we started at 6:30, I'm seeing the benefits of actually why we always add in that extra time. But usually we let you know that we're doing it, so sorry about that. So I really want to thank everyone for coming to a really important and special presentation. I'll get to, we will do an introduction of our speaker after my talk, but I'm super thrilled that Rick is here with us. I'm really honored to have him. I was talking with many of you, and it was so great to see so many people at the Boulder Jewish Festival yesterday. Really special and important day where we were both able to honor the memory of our dear friend Karen Soren Diamond, as well as the June 1st attack and commemorate that as a community, but also really celebrate what makes this community so special. And for me, I was able to see the breadth of our community come out in meaningful ways in what I'll call Jewish joy. And that is really important. And two of those organizations that we're going to have be here present tonight were there with us because it is the full breadth of what makes up our community that was present. A couple things coming up that I just want you to know. We have a number of lectures happening this summer. Definitely check those out through our exchange program. That's our lifelong learning program that's here at the JCC. Geared towards 55 plus, but you don't have to be. I see a couple of you that fall in the category that I fall into. Not for long, though. It's not for long. So I just want to let you know that next week we actually have a really interesting one. It is the anniversary, 150th anniversary of the historic Temple Aaron in Trinidad. It is the first temple that started in Colorado, Temple Aaron in Trinidad, Colorado. And we're there. It's a really interesting synagogue that almost didn't continue to being a synagogue, and they've done a lot of work to be able to keep it, restore it, and so the people who are working on that are coming to talk with us, and that's happening next week. So with that, I want to introduce Evie Cohen, who is here both as a community member, but also representing the two organizations that are really helping bring tonight into place, the Boulder Hevra Kadisha and JADE, the Jewish Association for Deaf Education. But most importantly, she is such an instrumental figure in being able to coordinate the Hevra Kadisha for this community. I mean, those that know. And I just want to appreciate you, because Hevra Kadisha is not a place where people have the recognition, and but to have leadership and have something that is truly a community-driven organization is something very different and special, something that is outside of a synagogue, outside of a denomination, where everyone can participate, requires some leadership, and I'm really honored to be able to work with you, Evie, so thank you.
I do just want to say I work with a wonderful team, and I want more people to work with me. I mean, I'm humbled by being recognized, but I definitely have a strong team, and I'll mention them. Marla Shapiro, Janet Lowe, Sarah Sturtz, Doug Sparks, Ed Cass, and I don't know if I've forgotten anybody, but I'm welcoming. We need to even increase our leadership team, and it's very meaningful and gratifying, the work. So I'll just say one other thing. JADE is a national nonprofit that was formed about 4 years ago to teach people everything you want to know about end of life. And most of us avoid it. And, we have a motto, talking about death won't kill you. We know it's not going to make you die any sooner, but you'll be more prepared, and it's a gift to your loved ones. It's a real relief when you do your planning and you understand it. And so Boulder Cover Kadisha has been around about 30 years, and it's not a secret thing. The only thing secret is, or confidential or private, is if you do a tahara, the ritual bathing, you don't talk about having done that. But it's okay to say, and you'll know other people in the community, they do the tahara, women on women, men on men. And we sit shmirah, which is sitting with the body at the mortuary, saying psalms and being silent and just being a companion and other prayers. So yeah, we're trying to get more people knowing about it. So I'm here and I'm honored to introduce you to Rick Light. Rick brings over 3 decades of dedicated teaching, writing, and hands-on experience regarding end of life with others to this presentation. While his presentation is focused on end of life, it is strongly associated with how we live our lives. And his journey into Jewish education began in Colorado. He grew up as the only child in a Jewish family in the small mountain town of Gunnison. After graduating from the University of Colorado, he pursued extensive Jewish studies at yeshiva in Jerusalem, and within the rabbinic program at the University of Judaism in Los Angeles, which is now called the American Jewish University. So today, Rick lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he serves as a course designer and an instructor, which he's been doing for years too, and the webmaster for JADE, the Jewish Association for Death Education. He also is the designer behind the innovative Hineni tool. The Hineni tool is a really wonderful, it's gotten rave reviews, which helps individuals navigate end-of-life planning. So it's divided into 14 separate topics, and I encourage you to go on the website and get smarter, learn more. And by the way, he's also an author of a book on hiking, so he's a very well-rounded mensch. So welcome Rick Light to teach us.
Thank you, Evie. I appreciate it. Now we'll see if the computer works. Still there. Oh, that's a good sign. Can you hear me okay? That better? No? Yes? No? Yes? Okay. Closer. All right. So tonight, to begin with, I want to take a breath. And in that breath, I'd like you to honor one of my teachers, my colleagues, my friend, Rabbi Stuart Kelman, who died a week ago. And may he rest in peace. I know his memory will be a blessing because he was a blessing in life. And talk about a mensch. This is a man who really did amazing things in life, and I think he's going to do even more now that he's free of this body. So with his blessing, I want to ask you a question. A lot of people, when they do spiritual work, say, "Who are you?" I remember Reb Zalman teaching us in New York one time. We did this retreat, and he'd send us out for a couple of hours walking through the beautiful grounds at Omega Institute. And he'd say, "Okay, I want you to ask yourself, who am I?" And then wait a minute for an answer, and then ask again, "Who am I?" And then say, "Thank you very much, who am I?" And keep doing it until you got the answer that just resonated and you knew, now I have a clue. But tonight, we're not asking, who are you? I want to ask you, what are you? What is a human being? What does it mean to be alive? So before I go on, I want you to answer that question. Yell it out. What do you think? What is a human being? A spirit. Okay, a spirit. What else? Say that again. A vessel. Community. Okay. What else? Connection. So, in typical fashion, if you have two Jews, you have 5 opinions. So, this is good. We're getting various understandings of what it is to be a human being. And then, of course, the next question is, if we are a human being and we are alive, what does it mean to die? What happens to that human being? Well, we're not alone in asking these questions. As you may have guessed, Judaism has rabbinic history, and before the rabbis, lots of other guys talking about it. And so for centuries, we've been talking about what is a human being. And the concept arose of soul. Now, the idea is simple. The idea is we have a physical body and we have a non-physical something. If you look at a human being, there's something there that animates that body, that makes those eyes sparkle. If you've ever looked in a baby's eyes, there's something there. And it's not about them talking to you. It's just a presence. Well, the rabbis called that soul. Now, in the Talmud, there's no agreement. I think that was a written rule from the beginning. Nobody can agree with anybody else. So throughout the Talmud, they have discussions, and nobody comes to the right answer. They all tell each other that they're wrong. But the bottom line is they discussed the idea of what is a soul for a long time. And by the time we get to Kabbalah, we're going to go through some timelines here in a little bit. They got into it in detail, and the Kabbalists really analyzed all the ideas around soul. So we'll get into that. Okay, what does it mean to have an afterlife? What does it mean for a soul to go on after we die? Well, in Pirkei Avot, they say, this life is the prelude, right? You're in the anteroom, you're in the waiting room, waiting for the doctor to call you in. So that's one view. Another saying in Pirkei Avot is that a tiny bit of time in this world is more precious than all the time in the world to come. However, one tiny bit of the world to come is worth more than everything in this world. So you put it together. And for the Hasidim, this is now 15, 16, 1700s. There's the concept of Gan Eden, which we're going to get into. But that's like levels of heaven. And Gan Eden was thought to be some reflection of who we have become in our awareness. So it has to do with how much spiritual expansion you achieve in a life, and that determines where you end up in the learning academies in Gan Eden. Okay, now stories are helpful because they help us understand kind of some of these esoteric concepts. Now this one is from Moed Katan. Moed Katan is a minor tractate of the Talmud, and Moed Katan has a number of things that have to do with death. And I'm just going to read this quickly to you. The bold is what is the actual Aramaic text. And the non-bold text is interpretation between the words, okay, by the rabbis. So Rava was one of the big sages in the Talmud, said to Rav Nachman, Master, meaning his master was dying, appear to me in a dream after your death. And he appeared to him, meaning his master came back to him in a dream and said, here I am, dude. I came back as I promised. And Nachman asked him, said, did you have pain in your death? And Rav Nachman said, it's like the removal of hair from milk. Okay, so if you've ever taken, one of your friendly dog hairs out of a glass of milk, it's pretty easy. You just pull it out. It's effortless, right? So he's saying that dying is pretty simple stuff. Doesn't hurt. There's no problem. It's easy. However, nevertheless, were the Holy One, blessed be he, to say to me, go back to that world, meaning life, I would not want to go, because the fear of the angel of death is so great. So it's an interesting story because it says dying is no big deal, but facing death, OMG, everybody gets pretty scared. Now this is a story, it's a personal story. My sister, may she rest in peace, died a couple of years ago in 2022. Now she lived in Colorado for most of our life. We grew up in Gunnison, and she lived in New Mexico, and she was a horseback rider and a skier and a hiker and loved the outdoors. And I was walking along the Santa Fe River one day after she died, and I said to her, just in an undertone inside my mind, I said, this is a gorgeous day. Why don't you come look through my eyes and you'll see this beautiful day? Because I figured souls are around, maybe she could hear me. Instantly, this big wind came up and blew my baseball cap off, and I saw her face, and her face was not just her face, and it wasn't that she was just smiling. She was smiling like the most mischievous, like an older sibling who had just pulled the rug out from under her favorite sibling, right? It was so obvious. She was there, she was laughing at me, she was joyous, and she was fine. And it was quite profound. Okay. So Judaism has had these concepts about an afterlife, but it's not like Christianity where we focus on it and it's our purpose for living. Judaism has woven the concepts of soul and afterlife and anything to do with the world to come into the worldview for how to live in this life. Judaism is about the here and now. It's not about if I do good deeds today, maybe I'll be blessed tomorrow. No, it's about do good deeds today because it's a nice thing to do, good deeds today. So we do things in this life for their blessings in this life for the people we can help. Now, Judaism also has a large plethora of prayers and blessings and liturgy and so forth. And in those, you will find lots and lots of things about death, about the world to come, and about things like resurrection, which we're going to talk about in a while. And most of us pay no attention whatsoever because it's just part of the liturgy and we just read it every day and we go on about our normal lives. Similarly, I shouldn't say all, I should say most of the liturgy that we use in death-related practices, customs, rituals like Tahara and Shmira and so forth, they all assume the existence of a soul. They all are built around the Kabbalistic understanding of who and what a soul is for a human being, and the fact that this soul lives on after death. Okay, so we didn't just come up with this one day. These things have evolved over 3,000 years or so. So in biblical times, all of the writings don't talk about soul or afterlife. They talk about Sheol. Now, Sheol was not heaven. Heaven and hell didn't exist. Sheol was the realm of the dead. It's just where you went when you died. And if you needed to talk to somebody who was dead, you had to go to Sheol. That was the understanding. We had to wait until something like 200 BCE before people started talking about individual souls. And that took a few hundred years before that became kind of standard fare. Similarly, in that time, people were starting to think about resurrection and afterlife. We're going to talk more about resurrection, but that came about later, around 200 CE. I should say 200 BCE, sorry. Gan Eden and Gehenna is another concept that developed during the late rabbinic period, and it is much, I think I'll go out on a limb and say it's kind of the fodder that created the Christian heaven and hell, because Gan Eden is thought to be a realm of learning and growth and bliss, right? Of living in happiness in the world to come. Whereas Gehenna is not hell in the Christian sense, but facing yourself. Gehenna is a place where we go to figure out, who was I in this life? What emotional baggage do I still carry? How do I deal with this stuff? And coming to terms and balancing and reconfiguring and coming to peace with the previous life. Then as the rabbinic period continued, these ideas sort of gelled, and the rabbis started talking about different levels of learning in Gan Eden, like having a yeshiva at different levels in the world to come. We'll get into that a little bit. Now, another 1,000 years later, the Kabbalists come along. Now, the Kabbalists were folks who studied Jewish mysticism, and they used the Zohar as their text. And they came up with an understanding of kind of all of the hidden things in life, and they looked through a mystical lens. And their understanding of the world to come is very detailed. They have writings about schools, about layers of soul. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But the mystical Kabbalists had a very keen interest in everything non-physical. So we'll get into that. Now, here's the levels that the Kabbalists determine comprise a single human soul. Most of us have heard the word nefesh, maybe the word neshama, and usually the word neshama is what we use when we talk about a human soul. But from a Kabbalistic perspective, there are 5 levels. You can see them here. We'll go through them here. The nefesh is really your breath, and it's physical stuff. It has to do with animation of the body and your connection with the earth. Ruach, of course, in Hebrew means wind or spirit, but from the Kabbalistic perspective, this is the emotional body. This is where we have our feelings, and this is what needs to be rectified, needs to be balanced when we go to Gehenna and stuff, because Ruach is kind of a bridge between the intellect and the body, and the Kabbalists considered the emotions kind of in between, and so that's why we have to balance the emotions when we leave this body, because it's carrying both realms. And the Neshama, of course, is what we would consider the person. It's their intellect. Maybe the personality is there. We don't know, of course. But it is considered to be that part of us that does the thinking. But most of the time, neshama is the word we use when we refer to somebody's soul. Then, of course, the Kabbalah said there's a couple higher levels, and these are related to our connection to the divine. And they really aren't individuated like we would think of, like, having to do with my personality or my life. They are sort of our connection to life force and to divinity as a whole, and they're not separate from divinity. And Yehid, of course, is the highest level. But it's interesting because when you look at these and you think about it from a Kabbalistic perspective, it's not like we have 5 separate things that make up our soul. It's more like a hand where each finger is a part of the hand, but it's not separate from the hand. It's all one thing, and they just each do a little bit different function. Now, the Kabbalists also talk about what happens after death. And it's pretty fascinating. Everything that I've read talks about a couple of things, and a lot of people who have had near-death experiences reiterate these kinds of things, or at least the first couple. And the first one is that they see deceased relatives. I remember when my dad was dying, his mom came through my wife and said, tell my dad that we're waiting for him. And we didn't know he was dying yet, but she did. And she sort of hinted to my wife, go tell him that that we're waiting for him, and it's all okay. So it's like our relatives are aware of our lives. They're present. They know what's going on down here, and when we're dying, they're ready to welcome us to the next level. The next thing that happens in the process of moving from a body to not having a body is that we take a good look at ourselves. How did I live this life? Was I a mensch? Was I a jerk? Was I humble? Was I, egotistical? Did I give my money away? Did I hoard it? How did I live? How good was I? And this is connected to, in a sense, the next step, which is the Gehenna, where you face your emotions and your feelings and all of the baggage you're carrying. Am I carrying resentment? Am I carrying anger? Am I carrying all this baggage that I no longer need, that I can let go of and come to terms and balance and sort of feel at peace with my previous life? After these first three, then we're sort of ready to go into heaven, or what we would call Gan Eden. And there are apparently a couple of levels, but it's not like, you take level 1 and then you graduate and go to level 2. It's more like, how aware are you? How spiritually aware have you become by living this life? And you will be in the school that's appropriate for your level of learning, because it's like going to college and taking calculus if you've never done algebra. You wouldn't understand what's going on in the class. So you have to go to the one that's at your level so you can understand. So you are guided probably spontaneously by your own awareness to the right school for you to continue your learning. At some point, and we don't know what point, we leave those academies and we rejoin the pool of souls that would take another life. And that pool of souls, we don't know what that is. When we bless someone after they've died, the El Malei Rachamim says, may they be, bound up in the bond of life. Well, that's this Tzror HaChaim. It's the storehouse of souls, the place where all these souls come together, and they may take another life, or they may help create another world, or we don't know what happens in this storehouse because, well, I haven't been there recently, so I don't know. Okay. Now, one of the things that continues in Jewish thought is learning. Learning is considered to be one of the highest things we do in life, which is why studying Torah is so important for people. And the idea is that souls continue to learn, and they are guided to study Torah and to study with, at the feet of the masters, and those masters may be Moshe Rabbeinu or other famous Jewish figures, or they may be famous teachers, or somebody who is in a school of thought that matches our vibe, our growth. And our awareness, our level of consciousness, is what determines which teacher and what learning we go through. We also get the feeling that souls move through levels of learning over a period of time, maybe even multiple lives. We're going to talk more about that. And the clothing that we wear, we use the word clothing, but I'm not sure it's a real metaphor. It's more like the presence of our energy is based on our activities in this life, our good deeds, right? If we are a kind person, a gentle person, a radiant person in love, then we may have a more bright firmament, if you will. We may have a more bright presence. So we don't know a lot about that, but there are writings that talk about that. And these things are all applied to the Gan Eden part of this journey, okay? Here's something that I found on the 2 levels in Gan Eden. You can see in the top one there that the lower Gan Eden really is where people are studying their earthly lives and reaping the benefit of their good deeds. And Upper Gan Eden is really where people are not interested at all in physical life, but instead are learning esoteric things, supreme knowledge, spiritual expansion, beautiful things on high levels. Okay. There's a couple of topics that I want to share with you that are controversial in Judaism and always have been. One is reincarnation, the concept of Gilgul. And Gilgul is a single soul taking multiple lives in physical bodies like this. And the idea is, at least what I could find, we as souls have a purpose. We have a reason why we're here. And from some perspectives, that is tikkun olam. It is part of our purpose here is to help heal the world. And we do the best we can. We come, we live, we do our lives, and maybe we don't quite get it done. So we go back and we're told, okay, good job, now go finish what you didn't complete. So we take another life to finish that job, right? To continue the work. And it might be multiple lives that it takes us to do that huge task that we were given in Tikkun Olam, healing the world. We don't know if this is accurate, right? This is somebody's idea that this could be why we do multiple lives. It also could be that souls learn in multiple ways. So we may take a life maybe as a Jew in India, or as a Jew in the Middle Ages, or as a Jew in the modern world, right? Because these are different modalities for us to learn. And as a Jew, we can then learn different aspects of Torah. So we may take different lives to learn different things. So this sort of says what I just said. It is also, the bottom one there talks about that we know ahead of time we're going to do multiple lives. And we choose to do a little bit in this life, and then a little bit more in the next life, and a little bit more in the next life, right? So we're sort of consciously laying out our path to accomplish our task, and we've decided that we want to do it in several lifetimes. The second controversial topic that has existed in Judaism since about 300 CE is resurrection. Now, in the Orthodox world, this is taken as a literal part of our heritage, and that it will happen in reality. In the Reform world, it's just a non-possibility. And there's every thought you can think of in between. Again, a couple of Jews, you're going to get a lot of opinions. So resurrection is one of those things that's very misunderstood and very controversial in people's thoughts, because people don't know what it means or what it could mean for them. One line of thought is that it's physically going to happen. And you'll hear from Jews sometimes say there is a bone called the luz that is part of the coccyx in our spine, and it will be the mechanism by which this body will be resurrected, will come out of the earth and be whole again with our soul in it in the end of days, and we will be alive again. You will have other people say, no, that's never going to happen. Resurrection is all about all of us attaining spiritual enlightenment, We will be resurrected, but not physically. We will be whole souls, implying that, souls who are still learning and coming down here to learn aren't complete yet. We're still trying to complete ourselves, and that's why we keep taking lives, is because we want to be more complete. But resurrection, the time of the end of days, the time of the Messiah, we will be complete. Each of us will be a whole being, a whole soul, and we will live together in peace and harmony, but it'll be a spiritual realm in which this all happens. It won't be here physically. So there's a whole range of thought. Okay. I want to ask you to do something simple. I want you to think about a conversation you had with somebody recently that may have had to do with work, it may have had to do with a ball game, it may have had to do with something mundane. Just think about that conversation and that person. And now, take a step back and say, okay, if instead of just sitting down and talking to that person, what would have happened if I included their soul in that conversation? So I'm going to have a conversation with Eva, and I sit down to talk with her, and before I open my mouth, I put forth the intention, I want Eva's soul in this conversation, and I want my soul in this conversation, and the four of us are going to have a conversation. And she does the same thing. What will happen to that conversation? I have been on weekend retreats where we do that as an exercise, and it is astounding. It will change every aspect of that conversation. So what does that mean? What happens when you include soul in your daily life? Okay, I'm going to go shopping. I'm going to go to the grocery store. Come on, soul, let's go check this out. What does that mean? It means, in some sense, that we are present in our wholeness, and we are open not only to hearing from higher levels, but the people around us. We might see other people. If I go to the grocery store and I see a bunch of jerks in the line in front of me, that's one way of looking at the grocery store. But instead, if I'm standing in line and I look at these people and I say, look at all those holy souls doing the best they can to navigate this thing called life, aren't they beautiful? That's going to change my experience. So including soul in your life can make a huge difference. The other thing, I saw a movie the other day, very interesting movie my daughter put me onto, that had to do with multiple universes. The idea in this movie was that every decision we make creates a multiple universe. Like if there's an A and a B, both paths to that decision get acted out, but they're in different universes. And so I'm alive in this universe, and I'm alive in this universe, but they're different paths because different decisions were made, right? And they play out to the end, and that's for every single decision. So there's a zillion universes, all simultaneous, and we are alive in all of those, right? So that it posed a question, what is reality? What's real? What's meaningful? What does it mean to be alive? It's a fascinating question. But what came out of that movie, and I thought it was profound, was that kindness transformed the experience in these different realms. And I see that in everyday life, right? If you, instead of sort of looking at the world through your closed vision, as we often do, you look at people and say, these people are hurting. Everybody is acting because they've had pain today, or they've had a death in their family, or somebody was a jerk to them, and so they're reacting. And then you do a kind thing for them. It's transformative, not only for you, but for them too. And it's an amazingly powerful thing. In the soul world, when we think about kindness, the writings talk about kindness uplifts souls. So it's like, if I'm kind to you, I'm also uplifting your soul, because it's like souls love kind energy, and so they feed on it or something, right? It helps them move to higher realms. Similarly, and we've been talking a little bit about Chevra Kadisha. Chevra Kadisha is the organization that prepares body for burial and it does a whole spectrum of activities around end of life. There's a ritual called Tahara, and Tahara is the washing, bathing, gently caring for a person to prepare them for burial. And in that ritual, we do this for a dead person. It's a dead body, really, there's just nothing there. But we're doing it out of unconditional kindness, not so much for that body, but for the holy soul in the room. So here we are with this holy soul and this hunk of meat on a table that used to be a vessel that is sacred, that carried that holy soul. So we treat that body not as a hunk of meat, but as a sacred vessel. And we're very kind, and we're very gentle, and we're very respectful. We cover their modesty, and we honor their dignity. Well, why should we do this? It's kindness. And it's about the sanctity of life, about we are human beings, and there's something special about being a human being. And we honor that, we respect that. And when someone dies, that doesn't take that away, so we honor them and we usher them on their journey. All of the Jewish death rituals assume that the soul is participating in this ritual. So that kindness and that respect are woven into the concept of soul being in our lives. And that's Jewish. That's 100% Jewish. Here's an example of a daily prayer. Let's see, let me come back to this one. We say this every day, or people who do standard liturgy say this every day. Thank you for restoring my soul to me. Well, what are they talking about? The idea is that when you go to sleep, your soul can check things out on other realms. And somebody comes along and says, hey, it's time for this person to wake up. You better get back in that body. I don't know if that's accurate, but So the idea is that our souls are precious. And the fact that we wake up in the morning, that's a miracle. That's something worth saying thank you for. But it's couched in the language of soul. Let's see, I guess indirectly I spoke about this. Tahara I spoke about. Shmira is the same thing. Shmira is what's called guarding or sitting with or accompanying a person between death and burial. And this is an interesting thing to do because you don't have to do anything. You show up, you be present. It's about being, not doing. And you're there, why? Because between death and burial, the soul is kind of discombobulated. It doesn't have a home, right? It doesn't have a body anymore. It doesn't have a place to live. And it doesn't quite know what's coming on. So the idea is we're there to comfort them. So in Shmira, we sit there traditionally reading Psalms. Why? Because the rabbis, looking through their lens, Psalms were really uplifting. In the modern world, I say Shmira is more about listening, being present, seeing what that person needs and wants. Some people may want you to sing, play guitar, read a story, read Psalms, maybe read some other part of Scripture, or maybe sing show tunes. There's a wonderful story from Fort Collins where a woman was sitting Shmira, and at 3 a.m, she just got some sort of hit inside to start humming show tunes, and pretty soon she's singing them out loud, and before she knew it, she was singing the whole show. And in the morning, she went and apologized to the family. She said, I'm so sorry, I hope I didn't show disrespect. I was singing show tunes to your daughter. And they went, oh my God, our daughter was a show tune performer. You couldn't have done anything better. This was the most fabulous thing you could do to comfort her. So listening is really important when we do Shmira. And it's about being there and doing what feels right for that person, because you're just keeping them company between these stages of growth. Now, one of the things that I always like to include when I teach about Jewish death practices, death practice work is not about death. It's about love, kindness, respect, dignity, honor. It's about the sanctity of life. It's about honoring each other. What does that mean? It means if we're going to do this kind of stuff for a dead person, why don't we do it for each other when we're alive? This is teaching us how to live, how to be better people, how to honor each other as holy beings who are in these bodies that are awkward and maybe not work perfectly, and we're trying to do the best we can, and life comes along with challenges, and everybody's upset, and all we need to do is take a step back and say, wait a minute, they're holy souls doing the best they can. Maybe I can pretend they're dead and give them kindness, give them honor, give them respect, dignity, common courtesy, and we'll all do better. Okay, let me ask if there are questions about Jewish end of life or afterlife or soul, and then we'll get into preparations for death. Any thoughts, any questions? You have a question? Yeah, you have a question? Please. Mm-hmm. So, in the East Indian tradition, reincarnation is assumed that when you reincarnate, you could be anything. You could be a cow, you could be a dog, you could be a rock, you could be a bush, a tree, right? A thing, something, anything. Jews are more, when you reincarnate, you are a human being again. You're not going to come back as a rock or a chair or something else. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Yes, please. Can the soul come back into someone who's alive? The writings talk about that, yes, and it does happen, apparently. And there are very specific circumstances under which that happens. I don't think it happens very commonly, but sometimes apparently a learned teacher will come back and sort of co-join a soul that's alive to guide them or to bring about a teaching that needs to happen. Apparently there are stories of people whose personality suddenly changes after they've had some sort of spiritual experience, and they become a better person and they start doing really good things and whatever, and people associate that with that kind of event where another soul has joined them and sort of corrected their course. Judaism also contains the ideas of angels and demons, and that there are spiritual beings who are messengers, helpers, and some of those are more helpful than others. And if your soul then gets accompanied by one of these helpers, it may lead you in a path that may not be as good as you want. We don't know how often that happens or if it happens, but there are writings that talk about it. So, I meant to give a disclaimer before I started talking, and that is that when you talk about afterlife, nobody knows. So everybody has their opinion, and the rabbis in the Talmud and in the Zohar and they all have their opinions, but they're based on either dreams they had or maybe a spiritual experience they felt in meditation or something like that, or maybe they just thought it up. But we don't know because nobody's come back and said, ooh, this is what happened, right? Yes. So her question is, what differentiates Jewish view of death and afterlife from other religions? Is that a good summary? And the answer in part is that Judaism looks through the lens of Hashem, right? Everything comes from God. In a Jewish perspective, when our afterlife is all about attaining closeness to the divine. So everything is looking through that lens. We do not talk about living this life in order to have a good afterlife like the Christians do. So that's a huge difference there. We do not talk about living this life in order to come back as a flower or a dog or something in my family, so that, or have my grandfather come back to be as a new pet or something, like East Indian. So our focus is really about attaining closeness to God. That's the Jewish perspective, and souls are simply part of that mechanism of how that happens. That's my humble understanding. So when we talk about a soul, Judaism is saying each of us is a spark of God. Each of us has a spark of the divine in us. That's what we call soul. That's what animates us, that gives us life. And when we die, that holy part then goes back to God. It's part of the divine wholeness of creation. So our view, that differentiates us from others, is that this is all part of God. We are part of Hashem, and we're holy because of that. And when in the Tanakh it says we're created b'tselem Elohim, that's not about that my ears look like God's ears, right? It's that I have a holy soul, and that holy soul is just like God, right? It's a part of this divine eminence that is creation, and it's special because it's sacred. That's my understanding. Yes. Oh, good, that'll help.
So the people on the live stream can hear.
Oh, thank you. What does Judaism say about a child that seems to have memories of a prior life?
The question is, what does Judaism say about children who have memories of past lives? Not much, right? But we know it happens, and it fits with the model of Gilgul. It's just that the rabbis didn't write it down, and most of our teachings come from the Talmud. So the Jewish perspective is going to be limited officially to what's either in the Zohar or the Talmud, right? And otherwise, it's interpretation. Yes.
Here we go.
Can you grab a microphone and
Here.
people
I got it.
Right there.
Could you speak to dreams?
No, talk to the microphone.
Could you speak to the impact or the importance or not of dreams in terms of death and that aspect of us?
So the answer is no. I can't speak to it intelligently, but certainly I personally have had experience with deceased people talking to me in my dreams or even outside of dreams. I've also known people who have had dreams and had those dreams be valid, be accurate, right? So I think there's validity there, and I think it has to do, there have been scientific studies about this space just before you're waking up, right? When you're almost awake, but you're not quite, and there's supposed to be a heightened level of awareness at that point, and it's like you're bridging worlds. And if you combine that with the rabbinic concept of a soul traveling around at night when you're sleeping and then coming back into the body, that liminal space right there is when we remember dreams. We don't really remember dreams except when we become aware that we're dreaming, and it's right before we wake up. So it's like that might be the space where that communication happens between souls and among souls. I don't know, The East Indian meditation techniques teach how to be aware during sleep. I've experienced some of that, and it's like watching your dreams. So you're aware that you're dreaming, you're not affecting the dream, you're not interacting with the dream, but you're watching it like a movie, and you're aware that you're watching. And that's a different thing. That's sort of like my soul is watching me dream, right? And I am looking through the eyes of soul. But I don't know how that fits. Yes, please.
I guess I'm so confused I can hardly ask the question. The spark goes back to God, or the soul. But, so when someone is born, a baby is born, where is that soul coming from? Where's that spark coming from to become the soul in this vessel?
So that's a really good question. And what she's asking is, what's the mechanism by which souls reincarnate or come into physical life? And I don't have a clue, really, but we know that souls live on after death. We know souls take multiple lives. We know souls continue learning. And we know that there's this, for lack of a better term, this storehouse of souls, they call it, but it's really kind of a pool of consciousness that we return to, where we're no longer associated with our individuation, our individuality, our personality, but we're still a soul, right? So that would be like if my hand is a soul, and I take multiple lives. Each of my fingers is a physical life, maybe in different time frames, maybe even different planets, I don't know. And in those lives end, and they come back, and now I integrate those. I'm still this soul, but I don't have an individuation, right? I don't have a personality because I've integrated that and I've let go of the physical, and I'm just a holy being, part of the divine essence. Now I choose then to learn something else, so then I send a part of me down to become another person, another life. And I don't know how that happens, whether I have to go through the storehouse of souls to get permission or whatever, or whether it just spontaneously happens. So the question is, for the recording is, then how does a deceased relative know to come greet you? Well, we don't know how long it takes. So let me take a step back. It's our understanding that soul life and spiritual life after death is timeless, right? There's no time. Time doesn't exist for the eternal now. So souls are in a timeless realm. They're not affected by time, but they're aware of our lives. So it may take a while for them to integrate their previous lives. And while they're doing that, they're very aware of their children, their grandchildren, and whatever generations after them who are living. And so they say, my great-grandson is now having a bar mitzvah, hooray! And so they show up to watch. And similarly, they might say, my son is now dying, he's 92, I'm going to go greet him. Right? And I don't know how that works. I've just heard the stories, right, and read the stuff. So that's the frustrating part about Jewish writings, is nobody gives you an answer. They don't say, this is how it works. Say, try it, you'll like it, and that's it. Yes, Andrew.
In your personal experience, how often do the members of the Chevra Kadisha who are doing the Tahara, the washing ritual, how often afterwards do they have some kind of a spirit contact with the soul that they've been working with, anecdotally or in your personal experience? And maybe if you wanted to contextualize that in any way.
Thank you for that question. So the question is, and I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, if we are as a Chevra Kadisha, which is a group of people now preparing a body for burial, work with this soul and midwife this soul between realms of existence, and we help them on their way. Now we leave the Tahara room, we go back into our lives. How often do those souls now come back to us and pay us a visit? The answer is I don't have a clue. They may visit us and give us support because they appreciated what we did for them. But I have had personal experience where in the Tahara room, I could feel the gratitude. I could feel their presence, not just a little bit, but right there. They were thankful that we did what we did. And After that, nada. I mean, just, we went on our way and they went on their way. It was like, thank you very much. So I don't know how to answer that. Question?
Yeah, so I have a question back here in the very back.
Oh, yes,
There
go
you
ahead.
go. So my question to you is, with all of this that you've shared of all these different ideas, what do you believe? Like, what is your thought process around all these different concepts of, I mean, there's a lot of opinions here, but like, what's your opinion?
He's asking what my opinion of soul is and afterlife. In the 1980s, I'm going to share something with you I don't usually tell people. In the 1980s, I spent about 8 years as a conscious channel. So I delved into the world of speaking with the non-living and having spiritual teachers flow through me. And I was a conscious channel, which meant I didn't go into a trance. I remembered everything that happened. And I was very cautious, and I used very specific procedures so that I wasn't open to any kind of ugly embodiment, negative spirits or any of that. And I was very pleased that the teachers who chose to work with me had one thing in mind. They were not the kind of teachers who were trying to teach, get a following. They were not trying to say, I'm a prophet, here's the rule, you follow me. No. They wanted us to learn about ourselves. They wanted to teach us we are expansive beings far beyond our possible comprehension, and that we should learn to be authentically us. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's a huge thing, because most of us, certainly I in the 80s, had no clue what that meant, right? How do you be authentically you? Well, I learned part of that is you have to transcend your own ego. You have to let go of being in control. You have to trust and let it unfold. That was the theme I was taught. Trust and let it unfold. Be present in your wholeness in order to allow kindness to blossom. And it wasn't like we created anything. It's like you put forth a holy intention, and the universe will organize around that intention and do what you need to have done. And it may not be what you intended, but it will be the right thing at the right time for the right people who are in that circumstance. And it took 8 years for me to open my eyes, right? I'm a little slow, but it was a fabulous experience, because these teachers were names from books of, archangels and whatnot, and they were supposed to be big mockers, big teachers, and they had very simple messages, Be kind, be authentic, be whole, be yourself, be real. Don't live in this superficial world that you're surrounded with. Transcend that and be something more. And it was astounding. It was the kind of thing that transformed me to understand that spiritual life is not limited. We tend to look through the lens that I am a soul, therefore, when I go to the next realm, I'm going to be something individual. Well, spirit may be much bigger and much more complicated than we can comprehend. And it may be on zillions of levels. And, it's like we can feel at the same time we can think. That's 2 levels. Well, what if there are 100 levels, and we're only learning a couple of those, and now the more we expand our awareness, the more we get in touch with other levels. So it's like these Gan Eden academies that they talked about, where you learn at the level you're able to comprehend. And right now down here in the Schmutzville, we don't have very much savvy, so we don't get to learn on a lot of levels because we can't handle it. What we can handle is physical, a little bit of emotion, maybe a little bit of brain, hopefully a little more brain, and that's it. But maybe there are 100 levels, and we're just learning to expand a little bit at a time. So my personal take is that there's a lot more out there that I don't comprehend. And I definitely know that there's life after death. I definitely know there are things called souls. What they are, how they are, who they are, where they are, I haven't got a clue. The other thing that this work taught me, and this will sound silly and maybe too simplistic, but choose not to know. Choose to be open to whatever the truth is that comes. Instead of walking in the room saying, oh, I know that already. No, no, no. You know, Andrew mentioned earlier today beginner mind from things like Aikido and martial arts and so forth. They teach, you know, look through the lens of a beginner so that you then learn, you see more, you absorb more. Well, in life, if we open up to the possibilities of many levels of possible learning, we're gonna learn those. If we walk in thinking, I know it all, you get nothing, right? So it's about being, I want to say receptive, but it's more than that. It's about being authentically present in this moment. You know, Ram Dass used to say, be here now. And what he really meant was be all you can be in this moment, right now, because this is what we got. In the next moment, we might die. We might be hit by a truck. We might transcend to another realm and do something else. This is what we have. We have this unique opportunity in this moment to be in this world, in this room, doing this lecture, right? And that's not something to take for granted. That's something special because we got to do it. So I think, you know, I'm trying to synthesize to answer your question. I think the answer is be you, but be you consciously, not just by rote. You know, not just the personality that you think you are, or the body that you think you are, or your parents, or your belief system. You know, that's the other thing, is our beliefs blind us. So don't believe everything you believe, right? Okay, let me move on to our last couple slides, and we can have more questions in a minute. So the last part of this talk could last about an hour and a half, and I know Jonathan wants that, but the practical part of soul is making sure that your family knows what you want after death. And there are several things to do when you prepare for death. And it's not about just sitting down with a lawyer and getting a will written up. It's a little more involved in that. You want to do both spiritual preparation and physical preparation. It's just like living, right? Just like everyday living. Now, when you do physical preparation, there are 4 different kinds of wills you want to take care of. One is maybe setting up a trust and a living will, things that most people talk about, right? You have a physical will that's going to take care of your belongings, your house, your car, your money in the bank, all those things. That's important, yes. But in addition, you want to take care of the other aspects of you. Now, one of those is your values. What's important to you? What did you learn in this life? Can you share with your children what values, what sacred teachings you have gained? That's called an ethical will. And you can write it as a letter. Reb Zalman used to write just a single little note and put it under Shabbos plates for his children. And it was like a surprise, and the kids look forward to it every Shabbos to see what Dad gave me to learn this week, right? And it would be a little gem. That's an ethical will in a small package. You could write letters to your children. I used to write, about once every 5 years, I would write a paragraph to my kids. This was back before computers were around, and I would print it up and hand it to my kids. In 2000, my home was destroyed in a forest fire. And my 11-year-old daughter, one of the things she took with her when we evacuated was that sheet, the ethical will that I had given her a month earlier. So it matters to your kids when you share with them what's important to you. What is life? How should I live? You know, these kids are trying to figure out all this chaos, all this mishigas in life. If you can help them, you know, just give them real simple things that are important to you. Be kind, be special, whatever you want to teach your children, but share it. And it could be a book. Many years later, I wrote a little fable that is partly an autobiography and partly an ethical will and partly just a dumb little story. But it teaches what I want to teach through this fable, and I put it on Amazon as a little, you know, book, print-on-demand book, and gave it to my children. Whether they read it, who knows? But you know, it's a way that you can share. And you don't need to make it formal. It can be a simple video of you talking and sharing from the heart. It could be anything you want. So that's the ethical will. That's the emotional part of us. Then there's the spiritual kind of after death part of us. What are your death plans? What do you want to have happen to you after you die? Do you want Tahara? Do you want to be buried? Do you want Shmira? Do you want this? Do you want that? Are there special things you want at your funeral? You know, my wife talked about having colored markers and having people come up and draw pictures on her casket, right? Just as a way to get all her friends to say goodbye. And I thought, how cool, you know, why not? So you need to write these things down, right? So there are 4 different things here, and of course the last one that we didn't mention are medical directives. You need to make sure your family knows. So if things happen and you can't communicate or you aren't capable of making decisions, they know what you want. Okay, that's basically preparation for death. We have lots of resources, and these slides are, I hope, going to be made available to you so you can download them and use them as resources. There's a whole bunch of books here, a lot of ideas, and I'm open to other questions you might have. Yes, please.
First, I just want to say thanks a lot. There's been a lot of profound thinking that you've fostered and inspired here. But, and one thing about the souls that I now have a new sympathy for my soul, because I've developed a really bad sleep pattern lately every couple hours. So if it's out and about, I gotta get back. I gotta get back. But this may be just, I'm not an academic per se, but I always, you know, try to get an A. And I like the idea about the Jewish view of weaving together the afterlife and the worldly life that we are living, not if this, then that. And so by living, you know, the respect and showing the kindness and nurturing the soul through philanthropy and other things for the right reasons, not for just the afterlife, sounds like you're getting into this lower level and upper level, and depending where you are in your development of life, you might go to one of those levels or different parts. And then you say the soul continues to learn. And so I wonder if, like, we didn't take that algebra, so now we're in calculus. We don't want that. But how do we get to calculus? Is it our brains just are never going to develop? Or we're a good student and we keep, you know, I'm not Jewish, but do I have to read the Torah, you know, as my soul to continue to grow? I guess I love the idea of the growth getting us closer to the divine, but I know you're going to say, oh, I don't know how, but you talked about lower level and upper level, so could you give a little more flavor or color to that,
Sure.
that growth?
So here's my understanding of that. I think it's not about learning as we think here with our little brains, right? When our definition of learning tends to be mental, right? That we We learn by looking through our eyes and learning letters or numbers or something and learning concepts, and then we process it with our brain and we call that learning, right? I think there are multiple levels of learning. I think we have emotional learning that we don't compute up here, but something in here computes different things and is able to process the energy of emotions. And I think there's another level of learning that's called awareness. And when we expand our awareness, we are able to perceive things that the brain doesn't normally compute. And I think that when we're moving through the ethereal realms, whatever those are, right? That's the level we're learning on. We're learning not so much with a brain, because we don't have a brain. We're not learning with the heart. We don't have a heart. We have parts of us that may be connected to those and remember those or have some, I don't know, some continuation of that learning that we learned in life. But I think our learning at soul level is much more expansive and on more subtle levels than we can comprehend with our feeble little brain here. So I'm thinking, you know, when you have an expansive awareness experience, it's unique and it's different than everyday experience. And I think when you get to soul level, those are normal and that's just the way things are. We just don't know how to compute that down here. Does that make sense? That would be my take. I don't know if it's right. Okay, one more question.
We got one more over there, and then you're next.
You're as concise as possible so that we can get a couple more questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I wanted to ask a question about, here in Boulder, there's a group of people who get together, and there's not any particular religious orientation involved, it's whatever. But the topic is people, and some of the people there have had this experience, people who have died and have gone to the afterlife, and then they're told it's not their time. Nobody wants to come back.
Right.
Nobody wants to come back. But they have to come back, and they do. And there's I think it's Dr., I can't think of her name now, Dr. Neal. She's written a book. She lives in Wyoming. As an MD, she's, describing all this. So what I'm wondering is, in your experiences, and there may not be an answer to this, but do you think that when people have a religious framework, like if they're Jewish and they understand what this means to them, that they can travel this question in a more effective way with that reference, with that foundation? Or is there a conclusion about that?
That's a really good question. The short answer, in my mind, is people's religious background and their beliefs in general form a structure for the way they think and view the world. It gives them kind of a lens through which to understand everything that comes their way. And especially if they are really, really strong in their religious beliefs, okay? So that becomes a more restrictive lens. Then when they have an experience like a near-death experience, they are going to interpret that through that lens because that's the way they understand life. And it may not be valid, it may not be accurate. And so depending on that person's belief, it may be really easy for them to understand what they go through, or it may be really difficult because it doesn't jive with what they want it to be, right? So I have talked to a number of people who've had near-death experiences, and realistically, there is no right answer. The real answer is that yes, there is life after death, and everybody has a unique experience. The common experience for most of the near-death experience people who come back and explain it is that it is an experience that leads you to something beautiful, and you don't want to leave that. By the same token, their belief system defines what it looks like. And so nobody can say the same thing because they all believe different things. You know, if you're a staunch Christian, it comes back to, oh, I saw Jesus, you know? And if you're a strong Jew, it's like, oh, I was at the rabbi's feet, or, you know, I was in a yeshiva. Well, it all depends on how you look, what lens you're looking through. If you go into a near-death experience with no baggage, right, with no precognition, you'll come back and say, I don't understand what happened to me. I just had this beautiful experience. And you'll have to leave it at that because you won't have categorized it. It's one of those things from my reading that transcends words. It's not easy to put in words, so people frame it according to their belief structure. And so I don't know how to answer your question. Yes, please.
Yes. First of all, thank you for this wonderful talk. It's just been great. My question is, from the perspective of contemporary Judaism, is there anything to consider or say about cremation, other than it is so contrary to Jewish tradition and ritual that it's off the table? Is there any voices in contemporary Judaism which are reconsidering that?
So cremation is a really interesting topic. In Jade, we of the staff have had a lot of discussions. We've written a lot of articles about cremation. Number one, there's the physical aspects of cremation. People talk about cremation being, you know, really good for the earth and all this stuff, and that's nonsense because it's a very polluted, you know, cremation is very anti-healthy for the earth. It puts all kinds of pollutants in the air. It uses a lot of energy to create all that heat. So it's not ecological in any way, shape, or form. There are lots of articles that will describe that in great detail. It does not reduce the body to ashes, as is the common understanding. Instead, what you get are leftover bones, which they put in a pulverizer, which is not respectful in any way, shape, or form, and they grind them up into tiny pieces, and they dump them in a bag and call them your beloved, right? So what you're getting is ground up leftover remnants that didn't get vaporized by this 2,700-degree oven. Now, so that's one side of the thing. The other side, we were talking earlier today about what happens to the soul when there's cremation. Judaism really honors the development of the soul and the path of the soul after death. And the idea is that it takes 12 months for a soul to integrate this life and then move on to the other realms, whatever that is. And that's assuming that the body is being put into the ground, and the soul has this opportunity then to integrate what it has just been through. If I cut that short and I throw the body instead in an oven, that's a shock to the soul. That's my understanding. It would be a very shocking thing. It does not give the soul this 11 months to gently reevaluate and reintegrate what it just went through in life. Instead, it's like slamming them into a new container and saying, here, you know, deal with it. So from that perspective, from both of those perspectives, cremation is an ugly thing. It's not a Jewish thing. It's not a nice thing to do. By the same token, in our history, if we're honest, there are a number of instances where our ancestors talk about building a stack of wood and cremating somebody who was our ancestor. So we have a history of it. In addition to that, we have the Holocaust. And some people say, because of the Holocaust, I will never, ever go near a crematorium. I don't ever want to have anything to do with that, blah, 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 blah. There are other people who say, my Bubba was in Auschwitz, so in unity with her, I want to be cremated because I want to honor her. Well, so all over the field, right? I mean, personally, I think the most respectful thing we can do is bury in the ground. Now, there are modern things. You talked about the modern world. There's NOR, Natural Organic Reduction, which is basically using chemicals to transform your body into peat moss or into a compost. And then there's alkaline hydrolysis, which is liquefaction of your body using chemicals and then pouring that liquid down the drain, right? So there are a lot of different things in the modern world. I personally think that burial is the simplest, most honest, and most respectful of all of them. I don't think there's a hard and fast thou shalt or thou shalt not. It depends on who you talk to, right? Some Jews will say, I want tahara because it's Jewish, but I want to be cremated because it's cheap. Well, okay, it is cheaper than burial in most cases, but for the earth it's not cheap, it's really polluting. So, do you drive a gas car that's got smoke pouring out of the back, or do you take care of your car and keep the oil clean and that kind of stuff so it doesn't pollute, right? I mean, so there are all these questions. I haven't found a single modern author who's come out and said, thou shalt cremate, it's the best thing since sliced bread. Nobody says that. I've read a lot of articles of different people who say, here's why you should not cremate, here's all the benefits of burial. But, we're in a mixed bag world. Everybody you talk to is going to be different. And I do understand the money end of it, because people don't have a lot of money. And when a loved one dies, if it costs thousands of dollars to bury them, that's not cool. By the same token, if it's $10,000 to buy a grave plot, maybe don't bury them there. You go to a country, a small mountain town, it's $500 for a plot. Okay, so they're not next to Bubba, but you can afford it, and they're still honored. So you have choices. Don't think that you have to do this because everybody else is doing it, right? Educate yourself, understand why and why not, and then make conscious choices. That's what I have. Others? Jonathan, anything? Am I out of time?
So,
One last question. Okay.
So I first of all want to say that what I have come to believe is completely subjective. It's completely what I choose to do and how I deal with loss in my life. And I want to be reunited and travel through time in whatever universe with a set of souls that I know that I have been connected with in this life, and choose to believe that it's likely that we have traveled together before. Those are human, those are animals, those are those who have influenced me and cared for me, and we lost a grandchild a few years ago, and it's very important to me to think that I will be with Caden again in some protective way. So I respect and honor those who have devoted so much time and energy, like yourself, to understanding the relationship between this material world and whatever came before and comes again or whatever. But for me, I guess if I can't prove it, I might as well just accept what feels best to me. And it feels selfish and kind of like very limiting, but that's where my head's at. So what do you think?
So just a quick answer. Judaism does talk about group soul connection in the sense that a group of people may choose to take an incarnation as a family, right? So let me be careful with my words here. A group of souls join together to create a family in a lifetime because they have worked together in the past and they may have stuff to complete with each other. This comes back to the whole idea of Gilgul and trying to complete tasks on multiple lives. So they may do it as a group. And so in one life you might be the husband, and in the next one you could be the wife, or the child, or the grandparent, or whatever, right? But you are in the same group, and as a group you are learning these different dynamics. So that concept does exist. Thank you for your time.
Thank you all for coming, and Rick, thank you so much for coming to our community and sharing your thoughts and wisdom with us. And thank you to all of you who are thinking about death and thinking about serving our community in meaningful ways. If you have questions, please talk to Evie or other people about being part of either of these organizations. And thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, everybody.